It's one thing to become rich, it's another thing to stay rich. And even if you wouldn't consider yourself rich yet, the secret to staying rich will help you either way on your journey to building wealth and ultimately reaching financial independence. So there are 4 parts to the secret I'm about to reveal to you. And to make this thing imaginable, I will use the analogy of the goose with the golden eggs. Maybe you've heard of the fable already, if not, here it comes. There was a farmer who had a goose, and that goose started to lay golden eggs. Pure gold, 1 egg each day. And in the beginning, the farmer couldn't believe his luck. He and his wife were very happy. But over time, the farmer became greedy and he wanted to have more than just 1 golden egg each day. And he thought there must be so many golden eggs inside the goose, so he killed the goose, only to find the same insides than in any other normal goose. And so the stream of the golden eggs and therefore his wealth ended. Now here's how the story translates to us. First, we want to have a goose, and that goose represents our wealth. And we build the goose by continuously saving our money. That can be either step by step when you have a regular income, or this can be at once when you come to a high amount of money, for example, when you sell a business. But saving money will not be enough, because if we simply save our money and keep it in cash, we then also have kind of a goose, we have a cash goose. But this cash goose doesn't lay golden eggs because money in itself doesn't give us a return. I do hear that occasionally from friends that it's not even that they don't save, so they do live below their means, but then they stash up the cash in their checking account. But in order to get the golden goose, we need to put our money into assets, because then those assets will produce us a return. So that way, and only that way, will our money start working for us. And this return then represents the golden eggs. Now, before I get to part 2 of the secret, I would like to invite you to subscribe to this channel if you want to learn more about building wealth and reaching financial independence. Part 2 of the secret then is to nurture the goose according to the season. Now, what do I mean by that? The size of the golden eggs depends on the size of the goose. When you start out on your journey of saving and investing, your goose is still a baby. And she doesn't lay eggs yet, but if they're very small eggs. So in this stage, you rather want to use them to build up the goose, to make her grow. By the way, I think my great-grandmother actually did that. She fed the little chickens the egg white. I'm not sure if this is in concordance with chicken feeding guidelines, but anyway, back to our goose. So when we start building wealth, and this is basically the first stage, we want to feed the goose as much as possible so she becomes big and healthy and lays golden eggs for us. And in this stage of building wealth, we want to have a high savings rate. We want to have a more aggressive investment strategy that has more risk, but therefore also a higher potential return. We want to focus on our income, because our income is our #1 wealth creation tool. So the higher our income, the more we can save and invest, and also the faster our goose grows. And by the way, this stage is not tied to your age. We start when we start. Even though, there are articles and videos about that say that you peak in income in your 30s or 40s or maybe even 50s. But that's always an average number. So that's a number for the masses. If you fall out of that range, worry not. There were also other examples like Ray Kroc, who started to build McDonald's at the age of 53, or Harlan Sanders, who founded KFC at the age of 62. And of course, you will also find 20-something-year-olds that are already a millionaire. And there you see that the range is very big. So your own age and the age of your goose might differ a lot. Now, either way, as you keep building wealth, at some point you will hit a stage where it becomes more about preserving wealth than building it. So the second stage is preserving wealth, and that is when we can ease out a little bit on the savings rate, and we can also take a more conservative approach when it comes to investing. So take a little less risk, because you don't need that high returns anymore. Now, how high that number is when you move from building wealth to preserving wealth depends on your goals. Like, for example, the kind of life you want to lead. A very luxury lifestyle will obviously need a higher number than a very frugal lifestyle. And this also will depend on if you want to stop working immediately, or if you can also imagine to just reduce the working hours as of a certain age. And by age, I also don't mean 60 or 65 or whatever the official retirement age is in your country. It depends on when you decide that you want to retire. So it's hard to put numbers on it, but here you landed on a channel that's about financial independence, maybe even financial freedom. And I would say preserving wealth doesn't really start before, and I'll just drop the number, 1 million. Now, if you've watched this channel for a while, you will know that I don't mean to put all of your eggs in one basket before you hit that million. It's rather than your asset allocation will change. By the way, I'm open to a discussion about this number because there are also people who say 5 million is the new 1 million, or at least a net worth of 2.2 million, which is what people consider as rich. And in another survey, Americans also answered that they think they would need 1.27 million to retire comfortably. Anyway, throughout the whole life of our goose, we also don't want to stop optimizing. And by optimizing, I mean to keep paying attention to the things that can hurt the growth of our goose. This can be costs, like costs attached to accounts or to investments, or also taxes are a kind of cost. That's why I'm a fan of a financial review at least once a year to check if the costs you pay are still reasonable. And that can even mean opportunity costs. For example, when it comes to income, when you stay at your job and then you're missing out on a potential higher salary elsewhere. It can also be missing out on potential returns if you don't invest enough or you start too late. Diversification also keeps the goose healthy, and that means to diversify within one asset class but also over different asset classes. And this becomes even more important with the growing size, because the more you have, the more you have to lose. And at this point you will probably also have adapted to a certain lifestyle, which is good. At the same time, the goal should always be to be able to keep your lifestyle, because going back from something you already had is hard. It's actually much harder than not having yet, because then we perceive it as a loss, and a loss weighs much more to us than a potential gain. That's also called loss aversion. And optimizing does also mean to never stop learning about yourself and also about personal finance. For part 3 of The Secret, I want to start with a quote from The Richest Man of Babylon. It's a great book. "A man's wealth is not in the purse he carries. A fat purse quickly empties if there be no golden stream to refill it. Arcad," that's the guy whose the story is about, "has an income that constantly keeps his purse full, no matter how liberally he spends." And that is the stage we want to get to, that the golden eggs from our goose fill our purse so that we can spend it without having to do anything else. But the danger is, as soon as we start spending not just from the golden eggs, but from the goose itself, this golden stream of income will end at some point. And that's why part 3 of The Secret is never kill your goose. In other words, never touch the money that produced the return for you. That also does include to not put it at risk too much, because then you also risk, losing everything. When you remember the story, the farmer became greedy and he wanted to have even more than he had. That's why he killed the goose and he went back to being poor. So translated to our wealth, this means that we first don't want to spend everything that we saved and invested. And second, we don't want to gamble everything away. For example, by putting it into unreasonable high risk investments. But of course, and that brings me to part 4 of The Secret, we also want to live off the golden eggs. Because we only create the goose so that she lays golden eggs for us. So let's take a closer look how we actually do that. So when buying stocks, you can live off the dividends. That is when you have a specific dividend investment strategy, and then you buy stocks of companies that pay a dividend. Not every company does. And then you live off the dividend. That's actually easy and practical, and there's no temptation, because you keep the stock and then you live off the dividends. When buying property, you can live off the rental income. That's also easy. You have the real estate and then you have the rent that comes in every month. Of course, you have to hold something back for tax and renovations and if a tenant doesn't pay. But overall, there should be something left after that, so you can live off the property, or several properties for that matter. When giving out loans, you can live off the interest income. That's, for example, when you buy bonds or certificates of deposit or any other kind of fixed income. Or you give out a personal loan and then you get paid the interest, and then you can live off that interest. Ideally here, you leave the initial amount untouched and then maybe reinvest later, because this loaning stuff almost all of the times has a deadline. If you invest in funds with an accumulating strategy, that means that the dividends and the profit get reinvested right away. Now that has the advantage that the goose is practically feeding itself and compound interest is working at maximum here. That's especially nice for our building wealth stage. But then to live off of that, you actually have to sell parts of it. And here's where the 4% rule comes into play, because we only want to sell as much that our goose still stays alive, maybe even keeps growing at least a little bit. And the 4% rule states that you can take 4% out of your portfolio every year without killing the goose, so it still keeps compounding. Now the 4% rule is rather a guideline than a fixed rule. I personally would probably only calculate with 3% to be safer. You will find others that calculate with more. I think Dave Ramsey, for example, calculates with taking 8% out because he calculates with a 12% return each year. So this 4% plus minus rule depends also on your return. And that is another possibility, to look at your return each year and then take the money out accordingly. Now that you know the principles of staying rich, you might want to know how you can get there faster, so build up your goose faster. For that you need an efficient saving system which automatically builds wealth for you. I speak about that in detail in this video. Thank you for watching and I'll hopefully see you there. Bye bye.